right. And once again, welcome in. My name is Paul Reed. I'm your host today and the digital marketing manager here for Advisys. This month's topic is really focused on something that's obviously more than just our focus is Life Insurance Awareness Month. So I thought it would be helpful to pull together some things that really focus on this idea and help to overall give some guidance on how you guys can create some awareness around this idea, whether it's your focus or not. So I know, a lot of you here may be primarily focused on selling life insurance and products surrounding life insurance. But for those of you who are maybe financial planners who, see this as an opportunity for, a different conversation for your clients and prospects, this should definitely be of use for you as well. So as I said, really our purpose here is to kind of empower you guys. We want to provide a better understanding about life insurance because it is really versatile, right? It has a lot of uses, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. So overall, the goal is to bridge the gap between what people know, which will show some statistics on, how underinsured people are, and maybe some groups that are starting to become a little bit more of a piece of the pie when it comes to the landscape of the business, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But overall, really about bringing it to people everywhere, right? And helping people understand that, life insurance is a really important part of an overall financial plan. So, okay, so at a high level, what are we going to be talking about today? I kind of set the tone there in the last slide, but the first thing is just understanding kind of the landscape. If you guys don't go to limra.com or look at the life insurance, studies that they do, absolutely encourage you guys to take a look. They do a lot of data gathering to not just about, who's buying it or why they're buying it, but really more insightful information about, the thought process behind why they're buying it, right? And a lot of that matters when it comes to creating awareness. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. So the second thing is it leads right into, oh my goodness. Thank you, Mark, being the first and only vocal one. That could have got real bad, guys. So I started everything, right? And I'm going through, let's see, this was my purpose slide, right? I guess the good news is I covered most of what was on here just verbally. But Mark pointed out that I had not started my, unpaused my screen, so no one was seeing it. You guys should be seeing it now. Apologize for that, and I'll make sure I kind of edit that out before we send it out. Yeah, so here we go. Again, the agenda. Good thing we didn't get too far. Thank you again, Mark. Really appreciate that. All right, so understanding the landscape was one. Talking about awareness strategies, some things that you can do to create awareness, different, I guess channels, if you will call them, that you can use to kind of get the word out. And then how do you create something compelling for those channels, right? And then we'll leave some time for questions if applicable. So now that everyone can see my screen, my goodness, I've done 100 of these, but there's so many different things that you have to have just ready that I always forget one thing when it's a new one for me. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about you guys as an industry. Insurance agents in the US are pretty much one of the fastest growing industries out there as far as jobs are concerned, and there are already about 500,000 insurance agents in the US. Now, depending on what state you're in, this is kind of where we first start to think about our demographics and about what awareness means to us, right? Because depending on where we're at, and here I have a couple different statistics here for you guys. This is on the left, states with the highest concentration of jobs as far as being insurance agents, right? So Nebraska, being a lower populous state, has more insurance agents per capita than any other state, right? And then Florida, being a pretty populous state, actually still has a lot of that too. And we can kind of imagine they have a lot of things to insure there from natural disasters or otherwise, right? So this is overall PNC. This isn't necessarily talking about life insurance. It's talking about insurance as a whole. But you can kind of see some trends here. On the opposite side, we have states with the highest employment level in insurance agents. And this is just like the number of insurance agents in the state, right? Now, California, obviously being pretty populous, has probably the highest number. That follows right along. But the point is that no matter where you're at, it's a growing industry, right? Now, why do I say this? Because, a very important part of creating awareness for the people that you meet involves kind of differentiating yourselves from the, in my case, in California, 44,000 other people doing this, right? Now, that's obviously much smaller depending on where I'm at, but as you guys know, there's a lot of people selling insurance, right? And there's a lot of different ways to kind of position your services. So, first and foremost is kind of just understanding based on where you're at and who you're selling to, what your competition is, and, why it's important to figure out something that helps differentiate yourself, right? These numbers, no matter what, really shouldn't stop you from creating a successful practice. As a whole, that really comes down to the way that you handle yourself in a lot of other areas other than just your competition, right? It has to do with your follow-up, and there's a lot of statistics out there talking about the reasons why, people trust or don't trust someone that is considered, a financial planner, or in this case, an insurance agent. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the overall need to create awareness, right? Now, this really has to do with the lack of coverage that people have in the United States. Now, this really hasn't changed in the last 5 years, which more or less that half of people have some sort of life insurance, and this kind of usually includes through a employer, like a term policy through an employer. But more than that, half the people don't have any sort of life insurance at all covering them, despite the fact that pretty much everyone understands that it's an important part of, but something always is keeping them from buying it. So let's just talk about that. If we're looking at the overall population in the United States, there's about 259 million adults over the age of 18. Half of those equals about 129 million adults with no life insurance. So again, the need to create awareness has to come from the fact that so many people haven't seen enough value in what it provides to move forward with insuring themselves, right? There's a barrier there, whether it's cost, just general understanding or access to information, willingness to access information. All of that kind of plays into why they don't buy, right? And again, I really encourage you guys to check out, and I'll cite a couple websites here. I can put them in the chat for you if you like, that I drew a lot of this information from, that talks about, the reasons why people don't buy. That's, again, an important part of understanding. In marketing and in my background, a lot of what you do is research on who your prospective client is, right? So that's the next important thing, is talking about how we identify our target markets. Because without an understanding of what drives a potential customer, how can you hope to motivate them to act? It's the old sales adage. I mean, this is ultimately kind of a sales business. It's what is the pen for? You guys all familiar with this? Maybe a sales manager to me once asked me to sell them a pen. And I don't want to go into the whole thing, but the long and the short of it is that unless you understand their needs, their drivers, then just the potential for protecting them from a demise really isn't going to be enough of a reason to sit down and have a conversation, or better yet, to move forward with purchasing a policy, right? So we need to start to understand and take a closer look at who is our customer, right? So I thought it would be helpful in this instance to kind of highlight a couple different target audiences that we can start to look at as far as what drives them and how and why they might be a good candidate for life insurance, right? And this is where I have to put back on my, individual hat and say, hey, when I meet people and tell them what I do, and I don't directly sell insurance, but, that I help people understand the value of education when it comes to financial planning. They're really intrigued because it's something that a lot of people don't really get access to, which is kind of a true non-sales pitch way to understand why some of these things are important for them to consider. Unless it's told to you by your family, which by the statistics, that's not even enough of a motivator. We have to figure out what motivates them to act. So again, couple market segments that we could look at as growth segments, or, and then start to identify why and what might motivate them, right? So let's talk about that a little bit more. The shifting marketplace. As I mentioned, there's two key groups that I think, and that statistics through all these, and you can see my sources down here below, show that these are growing areas of, needs for insurance. And the first one is single mothers. Probably not what you were expecting, but as you can see from our statistics here, the number of single mother households with minor children has increased 40% since 1980, right? That number is not going down. And it represents right now a market opportunity of about 5 million households. Why is this important? Well, as we look at who this individual is, we start to understand that they have a higher, worry rate as far as some of the things that they're concerned about financially. They represent usually, a solid income that's responsible for taking care of multiple people, right? Just like a surviving parent might be. So this is someone that definitely has a lot at stake, depending on the situation. Again, every person is unique, every situation is unique. So this is kind of a touchy thing, but it's something that obviously is showing that has a high need for insurance and represents someone who would be a great potential customer, right? So when you look at, talking and sitting down with someone like this, you have to be thinking about these kinds of things, like what are the drivers for them? And the source that I have down here, and I will definitely put this in the chat before the end, is a great look at the way that you can look at a demographic, right? And this being single mothers, it shows, what are they worried about in order, and, what are the reasons that they're not purchasing life insurance, those kinds of things. And that helps you when you're sitting down with someone, because ultimately, although we all have the need for this, again, the reasons why we move forward with it are going to be vastly different, right? So the next group, probably not unsurprisingly, because this is just an emerging large portion of, the workforce, is going to be millennials and Gen Z families, right? These are younger families with, infant to, preschool, young elementary children, probably would include myself even. I'm on the older end of that, but, I have 10-year-olds, right? So this group is important to identify and understand, because they're going to start to make up more and more of the landscape of what makes up your available business. And they are finding insurance more and more important over time, right? So just in the last year, and this again is from LIMRA, a recent study that was done about, the insurance ownership rates of these age groups, right? So 18 to 26 and 27 to 42. From 22 to 23, Gen Z, which is that 18 to 26, increased a whole 6%, right? As far as insurance ownership. People are starting to understand the value of it a little bit more. It's becoming more accessible. I don't know if that's just because there's more information about it, but the trends are showing that both of these groups, millennials included, but at a lesser rate, are starting to consider insurance ownership and move forward with it at a higher rate, right? So even if you've been in this business a long time, this is important, because, as you start to move into your clients retiring and maybe their kids being an opportunity for business, you have to understand what makes them tick, what drives them, right? Because they're not the same, those two groups, or, the people that you sold policies 15 years ago to, they're not the same anymore. We have different attitudes and different, temperaments towards the things that are important to us, right? So what I think, and this is, again, a little bit of my own personal opinion, is that the rise of like gentle parenting and some of the ways that I won't say like, I'd hate to use the word coddle, because it really depends on the individual, but, we care more now. And I think that's reflective in the attitudes of the way that this business is going. The importance of taking a quote holistic approach, meaning it's more and it's less about just a hard sales pitch and more about client development. And client development means that you need to understand who your neighbor is and who you're dealing with, who you're sitting across the table from, right? And this group in particular seems to be caring a little bit more. So, take it for what it is. And again, depending on where you're at, this is going to vary widely. Where I live in San Diego is very different than where you might live, where I just was visiting in Omaha. Same good people, right? People that care about their families, people that want to, have financial security and gain financial security, but very different temperaments and maybe lifestyles, right? Okay, so enough about the why. You guys know the why you do this for a living, but I like to say that because, having a marketing background, sometimes I think people that do this for a living go, well, what makes you an expert in this? And I'm not, but I've done sales my whole life. And I went to school for, marketing, which taught me a lot about the way people think. I'm a sociology kind of buff. So I really think that understanding, the person first and foremost is the key to understanding like how to sell them, right? So, and if you can kind of get that barrier down through education, which is what each of these strategies really is at the core of each of these strategies, I should say, that makes it more accessible, and it makes you seem like an educator and not a salesperson, right? And people definitely want to work with an educator versus a salesperson. That's something that provides value, education, right? Anyone who went to college knows that, they got some value out of that, even if it was just what not to do sometimes. But when we talk about strategies for creating awareness, there's kind of 4 different areas, and I've put them all up here already. The first is one I've already mentioned, LIMRA. Gosh, they do a lot of work. They create infographics. They give you a lot of industry-specific information to help for research, right? Research is important because then it helps you relate to your audience. So when you're doing channels like LinkedIn or, whatever your social channels might be, if you even do that, again, this is a really valuable source because it's straight from the tap information about why people need to consider this stuff and why they're not, right? So if you're talking to, a church group who maybe has a single mother's Bible study, right? That's very common. There's a specific message that maybe you'd want to craft for them or to put on the bulletin board or on their Facebook group, whatever, right? So consider that when you're doing that, but these are great resources for you. If you're not leveraging social media, I can understand in this industry, it's a little bit like more community driven, right? So the next couple ideas, the first of which, or I should say the very next idea, community seminars, is something that I actually did a full webinar on last month, talking about how to put together lunch and learns, or, some people call them workshops, etc. So if you're interested in that, I highly suggest you check that out for more detail. But the general idea is that this is a great way because you're already hopefully tapped into some, resources in your community, whether it's a social club, Elks, Kiwanis, Rotary, those kinds of things, or a church. Maybe you just already are sponsoring a little league team or coaching a soccer team. All of these types of things, you're probably at some point talking about what you do and maybe the services that you provide. So this is just another great way to kind of get the word out. And what we'll take a look at in the second half of this session today is materials that Advisys provides and our company provides that help you facilitate all of this, right? Whether it's just generally educating people about the need for life insurance or hosting some of these events, or even, the next one, business collaborations. This seems kind of like but when you talk about, promoting yourself in your business, you're probably getting out there and, working with maybe the fire department or the police station. I know a lot of people that I've talked to that have created niche businesses out of specific jobs based on where they're at and the industries that are there, right? Like here in San Diego, there's a couple ports. So it's like longshoremen, right? Yeah, they have specialized things you need to learn. You're already having to do that anyway, but really good ways to kind of figure out how to touch other businesses that maybe could use your services, right? And then lastly, at the core of each of these, or when you actually sit down with a prospect, you're going to want to provide something personalized for them, right? Something that speaks to their sensibilities, their level of understanding, and that overall would motivate them individually, right? So how do we do that? We have to create something compelling. And this is the part where kind of you have to really put yourself in the shoes of the individual. A lot of people get bogged down with what it means to create a presentation or the value of quantifying the need for life insurance. A lot of people say, okay, well, it's really basic. You have life needs that you can't pay for, you don't want to pay for out of your retirement expenses. And I can show you the math on a pad and paper on why, it makes sense to pay this premium amount, right? But there's so much more to consider or I should say that an individual considers when they're talking to their family, right? It's not just whether it's right or wrong. It's how does it compare to the other things that we're currently dealing with in our lives? And unless you have a complete picture of that, you may not know. And then the other half of it means, what do I actually put in front of them? What is of value to them? And am I doing it the right way? And I love this Henry Ford, if you think you can or you can't, you're right. And I always think of that I like to put that before I go into the actual, program that we offer at Advisys, because a lot of people get overwhelmed with the amount of information that this tool provides. At a high level, we're a giant library of materials, education, analysis, calculators that you can use to present to a client. Today's focus is absolutely about life insurance, but we cover basically every topic that you might, want to cover with an individual, from, their personal finance and budgeting down to all the other types of insurance, critical illness, long-term care, disability, even talking about retirement planning. For those of you who maybe take a sell life insurance, but use it as a vehicle to help fund retirement planning, which we have specific reports about that. It's a great way to just start and continue a conversation with someone that ultimately leads to them going, hey, I get it, and I'm ready to make a decision, right? That's our goal with this program. But there are over 600 different reports in here. So people often get overwhelmed and go, I don't think I can do this. That's why I put the Henry Ford quote there. If you think you can't, you can't. But if you start to understand and spend a little time with us, because training and support is included, then we'll teach you how easy it is to kind of put this stuff together. You can use templates and things to kind of cut the time down. And really then the value becomes, most of my focus is on the individual, not in the hours that it usually takes to put something together, right? So what I've done today is I put together a sample presentation, if you will. This is not by any means all the reports that we offer on life insurance. I think it tells a good story, and which again is a very important part of presenting to someone is, do you have a narrative for them to follow? Which is why I always start with an agenda. This is one of the types of materials that we offer in the tool, and it's really not about education directly, but it is a chance for you to start to take control and start to show them your process. We give you the ability to type in your own introductory sentence. Here I've put something like, hey, it's my job to make sure that your family doesn't have to worry, right? This process is really intended to create financial security and help you learn. I like that phrase, help you learn, because again, I'm not selling you anything. All I'm doing at this point is helping to prepare you to make a choice. You don't have to do anything, right? But we want to prepare you to make the right choice. And if that choice is not moving forward with purchasing life insurance, okay, great. But we all know that the goal is to get them to purchase. So we just don't need to start with that or even have to worry about that. We want them to worry about the things that they worry about. And that's what happens to my family if something happens to me. That's why I always lead in with something like an approach piece. No matter what topic that you're covering, and in this case, we're talking about life insurance, we just kind of want them thinking about the need itself and maybe why it's important to consider that need. Without the importance of the consideration, the awareness part, there is no customer interaction, right? There's no moving them down the funnel if they don't have awareness. That's why it's the top of the funnel, right? So creating awareness is just getting them thinking about the what ifs. So what if you were to die today? Do you understand the things that would need to be paid for? Are you considering all the things that would need to be paid for, right? That includes, and we kind of list them, the income needs, both now and ongoing, household living expenses. Do you live in a nice house? Like, how much is that mortgage payment? Can one person afford that on their own? Are there things in place to make sure that the kids still go to college? Is that important to you? All of these are questions that you can just start to ask based on very important and small bullet points. So we call these approach pieces because it's not meant to cover very much at all other than why we are covering it, right? So we always end with a question. If you died today, do you think your plan would be ready? And if the answer is no, great. There's another report for us. We can talk about why, what are the general purposes of life insurance? I like to start with this because it's low barrier of entry. If someone knows nothing about life insurance, this is a great way to just create a general understanding and awareness of what it does. So there's death benefits. They can be used for these things, right? Pay off loans. And you guys know this. I don't have to go through all of this necessarily. But what I like to highlight is that oftentimes people don't know that there are other uses for life insurance. For example, this is what attracted me to life insurance. I found out that you could use cash values to pay for college. I was like, done. And it was an easy way to protect myself and, put money away for school, tax deferred. Awesome. This is a great way to kind of start to show them that it's more than a one-trick pony. They don't need to die to use it. And some of the initial roadblocks are usually due to misunderstanding. So these couple reports, this, and maybe even if they're really needing some help, a glossary of terms is a great way to show, hey, I'm here to make sure that you understand. We're not talking above your head. Especially a lot of people shy away from these conversations because that's exactly how they feel as soon as some of these terms start coming out. Contingent beneficiary, well, I'm out, and it just scares them away. So what we want to do is make it approachable, make it something that's important to them that doesn't just scare them off before we get into the nitty gritty of, how much they need, what type of policy should they buy, and da, right? So if you are set on doing numbers at the beginning, I suggest keeping it simple. We have two different ways to do that. And actually, I'm going to swap the order of these just for my own intent. The first is the lifetime earnings calculator. This is one of about 60 or 70 different short financial calculators that we offer in the tool. And I'll try to enlarge this so you can see just how kind of simple this becomes, right? And all we're doing is we're entering an age. If I have someone who's, let's say, that millennial client, I'll use my own age, even 38, and a partner that's close to that age. I want to retire at, let's just say 65. I'm going to make up my salary, and thank you. I'm not going to share that with everyone. And let's just say, I want to show what this individual is going to earn over their lifetime. And because they're younger, I'm going to say they have a higher annual increase in earnings than 1%. I'll say 2, right? Now, some interesting information comes out of this. We show them, yes, that between the ages of 38 and 65, which my loose math says 3 less than 30 years is 27 years from now. Between now and 27 years from now, you will have made $2.8 and $2.5 million respectively. The question becomes, if you have a young child, what happens if, I cover up and I'll, fake cover up half of that income? What happens, to your lifestyle, to the plans that you guys have for your life if some of that or half of that income is gone because something happens to you? What does the rest of the life look like? And I mean, if you sell disability or long-term care, you can sit, or someone's in a high risk. This is where, again, demographics, people, if you have a high risk job, something that per capita, puts you less insurable because you do something dangerous, then, this can have to do with disability and your expenses increasing while the income is gone, right? Or down. So really a couple of different ways to do it, but it doesn't need to be complex. We just want to show them what's at stake, right? We want to set the stage for, what's at stake so they can make the decision whether or not it's worth protecting. As you'll see at my topic, my cover page is entitled The Most Important Asset That You Have. I was always taught, it's things, right? When you're coming up, you always think, oh, it's my most important asset would be my house. But it's not really. It's your ability to exist and earn an income to support your family and the people that matter to you. That's your most important asset, right? And so we're really talking about protecting that. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but I would highly suggest starting with just making sure this also gauges, starting with education gauges their level of understanding for you. So how, I don't say we to talk down to people, but we need to talk their language, right? We need to help them understand in a way that is their learning modality, that is their style. And that is a really good way to do that, starting with some basics. The next basic that you can do is a little bit more focused on life insurance itself. And this is probably our absolutely most popular calculator, right? And this is called our dime calculator. It just takes your 4 top needs. That's covering your debt, replacing your income, handling your mortgage so you don't have to move out of house and home, and the consideration of higher education as a part of life insurance, right? So all of that considered is not the whole picture. Obviously, there's Social Security benefits, and there's a lot more detail in there, but it's like a carrot on a stick, right? We want to kind of lure them into the conversation without giving them too much. So we help them understand that if we want to replace these things, cover our debt, replace our income for, I won't even say 25 years. Let's say it's until the kids are out of the house, 18 years. That there's a need for insurance in the range of X dollars, right? And that's represented here on the bottom. Based on your current needs, you'll need an additional, because they do have that policy at work of existing life insurance proceeds, but much to their chagrin, they're going to need quite a bit more. Now, they're going to say, well, what about Social Security? And what about da-da-da? And great, that's exactly what you want. Now they're engaged in the process. You want them thinking about, well, I thought I knew that there would be less of a need. And that's yes, perfect. Good job. Now you're right. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about how that plays in. And this is where I would take my first breather. And I am going to actually do that and take a little sip of water. I tend to go quick. I practice this, I get into my groove, and that's good, I think. But, I want to pause. I say breather because this is where you're going to stop and say, okay, now before we go any further, there's some information that I need to gather from you, right? And this is probably to be expected, but I say pause because there's a big difference between what we do at Advisys and what some other programs try to do, whether it's for financial planning or insurance. And that is, we try to keep it absolutely as bare minimum simple as possible to get you the information and to give you enough information to, guide them along the way here. So what I mean by that is all of our needs analysis, and again, we cover 16 different topics that you can build your own, custom input form, like I haven't done here. I'm covering one topic today, but for those of you who want to take a more quote unquote comprehensive approach, meaning we're going to cover the basics of financial planning first and personal finance, and then move to asset protection, and then talk about retirement, et cetera, you can do that. But no matter what you do, what we're going to do is ask for the very least invasive information from the individual as we can. No social security numbers, no account numbers, nothing beyond your name and date of birth, which you could share. My name's Paul Reed. You don't think there's another Paul Reed that's with my birthday out there somewhere in the 6 billion people on the planet? Maybe not, but chances are there's at least enough there that it's not personally identifiable. The reason that's important is because, again, people are wary of this industry. Like it or not, they're not really trusting of salespeople, go figure, right? So this is a way to kind of show them we're not looking to be invasive. We're just looking to get enough information to show you and guide you down the path here, right? So what we're looking for is who you are, do you have kids, and are they dependents of you and your spouse or not, right? The reason that matters is, again, for Social Security. Likely that they do not understand that. So this is the first instance where you can kind of explain there are some portions of Social Security that kind of pertain to who the kid is a dependent of. And, that's going to matter, right? When it comes down to calculating the thing that you said was missing. So then we look at education. This is great because in Advisys, we have a tie-in to the College Board data set, which means that every year we get a big old file that we upload that gives you the active cost of 2-year and 4-year universities. I love this because there is no better way to help them understand how expensive it's going to be to send a kid to college than to show them how much more expensive it is now to go to their school than it was 15, 20 years ago when they went, right? Or maybe less, I guess, depending on, again, if this is a millennial client and they're just 10 years out of college, they might even be surprised to see how much more it costs, right? But active information, accurate information that you can use to kind of set the stage for what to truly quantify what their need is, right? Then we look at their income needs over time. Now, I'm going to try to give you a better look at this here on the left-hand side. We really, move this into 3 different areas. We want to show income needs either for life, that's more of like your whole life policy, or we can uncheck this box and we can type in just for a number of years. The reason I like life is because it kind of tells the complete story of what happens today, what happens when your kids go out of the home, what happens when you retire. Now, if the general mentality is, she'll probably remarry in 10 years because we're young, okay, but you want to be able to position it one way and then give them the option. Again, it's about, as I said earlier, when they ask the question, it's about keeping them engaged in the process, getting them to ask questions and be involved. Sometimes means kind of pulling that curtain back a little bit and helping them understand this data and why we're considering it, right? So I do absolutely encourage people to present this face-to-face with individuals because it's a great way to keep them involved and say, well, what happens if we save a little more, or we, put an extra $500 in our retirement, or buy that extra $100,000 policy? How does that change things? Very easy to come in here and manipulate this information, right? So we need income needs. We want to know where their income sources are, whether it's their job, or a lot of people nowadays have, Etsy businesses and little side hustles and things like that, where they're getting a second stream of income that maybe isn't a traditional job, right? So we want to capture all of that. We want to capture what they owe, if they want to send their kids to school and where, again, with that College Board information, and then some other details about, assumptions, right? What's the mortality age for the surviving spouse? What is inflation doing? That's a big topic right now, right? How much is education costs going to inflate over time? That's, again, state by state, but it's not cheap. And then what does final expenses cost? That's a good stopping point in the conversation to say, have you looked at, do you know how much funerals cost at a bare minimum? You know, I can tell you, I had, unfortunately, my mother passed 5 years ago, and my sister and I were not ready for that, so I can tell you it's not cheap, and people should absolutely stop and consider how this affects them. There was a stat on one of the LIMRA studies I was reading that the average individual thinks that within 3 months after a death, they would be in financial dire straits, right? The average person says, I would last 3 to 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, I would definitely be in financial trouble without insurance, right? So absolutely consider what the emergency reserves, the money that would need to be set aside for that kind of thing, bereavement, figuring out family care. I mean, there's a million things that can happen that are going to be unique to the situation, but all of this kind of is wrapped up in these simple little assumptions that we make, right? Now, I say all of that to say that we capture that data in 4 pages. And the last page really is only like a little bit. It's not really a whole page, right? So it's 4 pages of information to get us what? A story that we can tell about their individual life insurance need and why, and how much they actually need, right? And we do that in a single page. We show you the needs now and in the future. It's personalized for the individual because we plugged all that in. And it shows that as a percentage of their income, right? Which we plugged in 7,000, which is about 73% of their total current income. And then it shifts over time, but there's a shortfall. Now, was it $1 million that we need in insurance anymore? No, but it is still about $500,000. Now, the beauty of this is the awareness and some of the other roadblocks that come into the reasons why people don't buy insurance typically has to do with cost. And I love getting to this point in the conversation because this is where you're going to blow that out of the water when it comes to, well, I just can't swing that 20, 30 bucks a month. I got to have that Starbucks. I got to have that, extra night out with the kids, whatever it is, that's prioritized over this need and this protection, right? I really like this part of the story because it absolutely turns it on its head. And I'll show you what I mean by that. They're going to take a look at this and go, okay, well, $500,000, where is that coming from? Well, we start with their immediate needs. We start with the things that have to happen right away. Now, this is going to be some point of negotiation for them. Actually, let me do this. I'm going to make this full screen. This is another way you can present in Advisys, by the way. You can just make the report full screen and kind of review it this way. You could export all of this to a PDF so that can be put in a PowerPoint. A lot of different ways to kind of absorb and present this material. For our purposes and jumping through all this stuff, I'm staying in the product though. Okay, so the immediate needs. The reason I say this is a point of negotiation is they're going to look at this and go, that's a chunk of money. That's going to take a lot of liquid capital, to cover all this need. So what if we don't pay off the mortgage? What if we keep that as a part of our monthly need? Okay, cool. We can go back and adjust our monthly need to increase it by the amount of the mortgage payment. No problem. But that will change things. So you're going to kind of get to this point and they're going to go, okay, well, we have this much money set aside to support those needs. The immediate cash needs, no problem. We have enough liquid capital. We have some money set aside to support ourselves ongoing. And they might think that's still okay. But then we go to the timeline report. This is my favorite one because it sells the cost. And I'll show you again what I mean by that. They say, okay, well, we need a $500,000 policy. And I may be fine until 59. But if I don't do something else, make more money, get remarried, whatever, I'm going to have a pretty extreme shortfall pretty fast for the rest of my life based on the needs that we've said we've had. And that's even stepping down the need. Remember, we have that shifting down as time goes on. The kids move out, it drops. She hits retirement, it drops again. So we're considering all of that. But the real kicker is that it's not just the $500,000 policy that you're really short. It's actually this, total of all those shortfalls that we show. So for a whatever amount premium, you're really solving a close to $3 million problem for the cost of a couple Starbucks, whatever it is. That idea that for pennies on the dollar, you're solving millions. Now, in my example here, it's one thing, but I can promise you that people don't really understand things like the blackout period, right? Here we illustrate that pretty cleanly by showing this stop in Social Security, hard stop at 47, that money goes away, $23,000 a year, roughly. And then it doesn't start again until you retire. Why? Well, this is where you can go back when they get a little shell shock. This is where you kind of want to ease them back in, and we start to educate them again on, why this happens. And actually, I don't know, I actually didn't include it in here. Silly me. In Social Security folder, we have all the stuff on Medicare, Medigap. That doesn't really apply here, but we also have a specific report on Social Security survivor benefits. Who gets it, who qualifies for it, how they calculate it. There's different benefits. A lot of people don't understand that there's a mother and father benefit or a child benefit that can be taken. But it explains a little bit about how that works. It explains, we have a different report specifically that explains the blackout period. So once you get to this point in the conversation where they're showing, oh man, that's just, a lot of money that I'm going to be out, you can kind of start to help them understand that this is why we need to look at this type of protection and look at the cost versus the benefit over time, right? Because over time, if you do need this at all, it's absolutely going to be worth it. And then furthermore, like we said, there's a lot of other uses for it. So I'm going to add this to the presentation here and just kind of plug that in. So if anyone requests a sample that it's in here, I'm going to drop that right in between. You can kind of see how easy this is. All I did was check the box next to the report. It got added to the bottom of my presentation list. And I just moved it to like a drag and drop list where I want it in the presentation, which is right about where we talked about it, right? About in the middle of the detail of the data here. And you can do what you want with that, right? You can order it, make it as the story that you like to tell. All right, so from there, once we kind of get them back on ground, the awareness goes back to what is the right type for me, right? And this is where it goes back to, there is no right or wrong answer. We are not narrowing down just yet exactly the type of policy. Maybe you have in your mind the policy that's right for them, but it's not time to pitch it just yet. We want to help them understand, some of the aspects of life insurance that we haven't talked about yet. Like, what type of policy should be determined? How do we pay the premium? Are there other sources of income I can use to pay the premium? Things like that. Other considerations to take. See, insurance can also be purchased in certain qualified retirement plans. So if you want to talk about that, we have reports on that. So it's up to you to kind of drive the conversation, but we want to help them understand that there's no one right answer. We can talk about different types of policies. We have individual reports that do that. Again, keeping it high level. What is it? How does it work? Policy variations, things like that. We have an individual report basically on every type of policy: term, universal, whole, cash value. And that's kind of the two that I like to hone in on, because these are the ones that I think people really need to know about, frankly, is using cash value life insurance to do a couple things. First and foremost, using it to pay for higher education, using it to fund retirement. Those are all different things that you can do. But we want to be able to help explain when, not just what you can do with it, but when to consider it. How is it taxed? Some of these things that maybe they're not going to think to have questions on, by presenting that information, it provides them with a sense of transparency. I think that is one of the most common things that I see in any of these studies, is like the lack of transparency that people feel is probably one of the biggest barriers. So they feel like they don't understand it, or they're not being made to understand it. So they therefore opt out of it, as even though it's a priority in their mind, right? There's so many conflicting statistics about, we think it's important, but we do nothing about it, right? What an odd thing for responsible adults. But it is absolutely how we treat it, this type of product. So we want to help them understand some of the different things within it and when it can be used, right? So to that end, I like using cash value insurance, this particular report, for more of the high level. And then there's different reports, and this one is a newer one specifically that talks more, in depth about a specific use of it, right? And this is for funding retirement, because there's typically these sources of, funding your retirement. This is kind of an alternative option. It's often overlooked. We kind of mentioned some of those kind of terms. What is it? Again, I wouldn't use these in conjunction with one another, because there's some redundant information, but definitely if you're talking to someone about retirement, or if you think that's the driver for them, is actually they don't think they're going to need it, but they're open to alternative investment opportunities, this is a really good report to use for that. It talks about those same things, when to consider it, again, talking about the time horizon that you have of needing the money. These are all other variables that are, in the periphery of considering any investment, right? But things that you'll want to consider, because these type of policies typically have a little bit higher premium, or paying the premium over years represents an obligation. So, we're not always painting it as a rosy thing. We're just making sure they understand it so they can, what I say at the beginning, make the most informed choice. That's really what all this awareness talk comes down to. Is awareness is, making you aware of why it's important to have insurance, making you aware of the types of insurance that are out there in a way that you understand, making you aware of your specific need for insurance, right? And that specific need can go even deeper. Let's say this is probably something I should have included on the deck, but didn't. Let's say that we're, dealing with someone that we've met, we're getting to know them, and we find out they're actually a successful small business owner. Whew. Awesome. What an awesome opportunity for an insurance person to meet and have a good relationship with a, mid-level small business owner, right? Maybe we're talking like 50, 100 employees or even less. These are an awesome opportunity for you guys to talk about life insurance, but not to talk about life insurance. You know what I mean? What I do is I think about life insurance as a vehicle to protect pretty much anything, right? It protects businesses. It protects key employees within a business. It does a lot of things. So if you find yourself, getting to know an individual and they are also small business owners, do not undervalue that relationship, right? Because there's a lot of opportunity to talk to them about using a life insurance policy to fund a buy-sell agreement to help cover them, even if they don't die, right? Again, that cash value, some of those policy variations work in some amazing ways that the average individual, someone who owns a business is an expert at what they do. They're not necessarily an expert in what you do. Scott has a policy. He'd like to see some info on indexed universal. All right, we do have a policy on that in here, Scott. This is a good opportunity for me. I like once a session to kind of show how easy it is to find material in here to use. So what I'm going to do is just go to our search function and type indexed, and then I'm going to search titles. Let's see. Oh, maybe I need to put indexed. There we go. Indexed universal life insurance. So here's a specific report on what is IUL, what is an IUL, what is the structure of an IUL, like why is it unique, like what is the index feature of that policy, how an index works. So this is all stuff that the average individual likely is not familiar with, right? But if you think this is a good policy for the person that you're sitting across from, there's no better way to kind of break down and help them understand than using a report like this. It essentially gives you the walkthrough and the things that they need to know, right? We have a objective, which is kind of the protection side of it, but there's some variables here that are different than some of the other types of policies that are out there, right? And we go into the type 1, type 2, common uses of it. Again, this is a 6-page report, but everything is written in very plain language, nothing to help them or that would go over their head, and all of which has these headers where you can pause and walk through with them, the different components that you feel are the most important for them to focus on, right? This one, again, is probably one of the more detailed reports on a life insurance policy, because guess what? It's probably one of the more detailed types of policies out there. It's not as simple as pay the term or pay the premium, get the benefit, right? So Scott, hopefully that helps you see that, but that's as easy as it is, or as difficult as it is. Read the rest of my original message. Okay, I apologize. I'm trying to keep it flowing here. You have separate report on IOL, but I think it should be part of the types. Oh, I see. Okay, that I can take back to. So in short, he's saying that it should be included on another report, which it isn't. I will definitely bring that back to Ron. Let me type an answer. We'll follow up so that it captures it. And then I'll bring that up to him, because that's a good point. If it's not, we have a lot of these high level reports, and as time's gone on, we've added other reports like this one that maybe need to include a footnote into another report. And so I do like to capture those. Mark is asking about it covering individual buy-sell agreements for disability, individual and buy-sell disability analysis as well. I'm not sure I quite understand that. So let me just say that in response to that, we do cover disability. We do have reports. Let's look at my business planning section here on continuation. We do have buy-sell agreement reports that cover a lot of different kinds of variants, like disability buyouts. I think maybe that's what you're referring to. But you can see, I would reference in here the business continuation folder, where we have several different buy-sell agreements based on the type of corporation they have, and then cross-purchase and disability buyouts reports as well. So I think that's kind of where you're looking for. But yeah, we cover, I said 600 reports, guys. I'm not lying when I say I think it's very rare that we're missing a topic that, or don't mention something that you guys are talking about. And if we are, please let us know, because that's kind of our whole deal, is that we cover pretty much everything that you could get a question from a client on. And even if it's not your expertise, you can come in here and type in a keyword and provide some value to them with materials that are trustworthy, we keep up to date, that makes sense to them, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you guys for the questions. I really appreciate, the additional kind of focuses, because there is so much to cover in this time. I included examples like a second to die policy in survivorship, or how does life insurance get taxed when it comes to the time to receive the proceeds, right? And then the stuff that I mentioned before about the business owner. That's why it's important to have a succession plan. Even if you don't die, what's your exit strategy, right? Who's going to take over? Is it staying in the family? What does that look like? Have you set up the right trusts, et cetera? I mean, there's so many questions, right? But the key is, and I go back to the very beginning of my marketing hat, to know your demographic so that you understand the right questions to ask them, or the right material to put in front of them when the time comes, right? When that right opportunity presents itself. What is it that they say about preparation and opportunity? That's where luck is, somewhere in there, right? I know I'm not saying that right. Luck is where preparation meets opportunity, but I believe that's absolutely true. And so your preparation is understanding this material, familiarizing yourself with your education, right? You already do that as part of every conference you go to, every, piece of a lot of your job is continued education. So, that also has to do with your sales process and how you present information, et cetera, and how you recognize opportunities. So, as I start to switch back and wrap this up, I just want to encourage everyone to, continue to educate yourself, continue to take a different approach when it comes to how you think about your clients. It's not just a catch-all out there. You really need to understand who you're dealing with, whether it's in, what type of work they do, or, the types of social groups that they, know them from. Those are all components to what makes a person tick. But if you use this type of material, it keeps the focus on that. We can use things like, and I didn't include it in here either, a goal sheet, which is part of our fillable, where am I at? Subject material, client interaction, goals. This is a good thing to just capture at the beginning. What are your most important financial goals? Peace of mind, paying for college, et cetera, et cetera. Then come back to this every single time. So you can build, I truly believe that you can build your own sales process around this, but the material is really meant to give you guys access to formatted stuff that helps you seem helpful, and not just like a salesperson, someone that can educate them first and help them understand the need surrounding this topic before we start to put a dollar figure on what that protection costs, right? That should be well down the line. At the point where we start to see, that we have a $500,000 need that can be solved with a $20, policy, whatever it is, we should be making more of a relationship out of that, right? We should have more of a discourse with them about the other things in their life that are going on that maybe warrant your knowledge and expertise, right? So the last thing I'll show is how this all comes together. As part of Advisys here, you have access to all this library of information, right? But you also can do things like brand it yourself. You can include a title page, a table of contents, a record of the reports that you gave them. If you want to keep, a compliance record of like what was being distributed to your people. All of that can be bound and customized with that title page, with your custom image and branding. I've done that just for myself today to kind of show you guys what it looks like, but don't underestimate the level of professionalism and the power of just giving someone a packet of information that's personalized for them and saying, hey, I took the time out of my day to help you and your family, individually better understand how to protect their future, right? All of that comes together, however you want it to, but again, my marketing brain goes, hey, let's protect your greatest asset. Let's brand it for ourselves. And then this can be handed out. And I know that's a little tough to see here. So I'll do that and then that. Oops. That and then that. All of that can even be included with headers and footers. So a lot of people tend to use this material for, individual reports, and that's okay. You don't have to do a full-blown presentation in here. You can just use the one approach piece to kind of get the ball rolling and then take it from there. You can do as much or as little that you want with this, but we still want to give you opportunities to brand it. So there's a footer line and a header line where you can add a line of text, learn more at my website or give me a call with questions, any of the kind of things that you want. Get creative with it. Try different things. See what maybe gets you an extra referral. I know that's a lot of what people get business out of in this industry is helping people, provides a path to help other people, right? If someone's happy with what you did and really feels like they got good value out of your process, they're likely to tell a couple people. If they really didn't feel like you were worth it, they're either going to tell no one or they're going to tell other people it wasn't worth it. He tried to hard sell me. Don't go talk to that guy. So what is your path towards differentiation from the next guy that's selling someone? Education's a really great way to do it because it's non-threatening and it's universally applicable. So with that, I'll kind of flip it back over to say, for those of you who do not subscribe to Advisys, we have two different versions that we offer, essentially. The one that I went over today is the one on the right. That includes the needs analysis component, 15 or 16 now different needs analysis. But the education version, for those of you who really don't maybe want to start, with a lower barrier of entry, still includes all the calculators. That's the dime and the lifetime earnings calculator, and all the education and customization stuff that we offer is included in there. The only thing you don't get is the needs analysis, which means fact finders and, being able to take a look at more data in, data out. So absolutely encourage you guys to take a look. If you have never tried us before, we have a couple different ways that you can do that. If you decide to purchase today, this is $200 off of our retail price. Typically they run for $9.98 and $7.99. So you can purchase today for a couple $100s off, or you can complete a demo, ask some more questions, get a feel if I wasn't able to cover everything today of what you might use this for, and we'll give you 2 weeks free if you're not ready to buy at the end of that. So give it a shot. Reach out to us with any comments. As you guys can tell, I really do appreciate the feedback. Scott, I do see your question. I'm going to make sure I try to have that answer that at the end here. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Let me get through this. I'll get to you. I'll answer your question, Scott. I really appreciate Scott specifically. I know you're here often and are regular attendee, so I appreciate you. So for those of you who don't purchase or don't already subscribe, here's kind of your initial entry price points. But you can reach out, ask questions. I'll leave our contact information up on the screen as I answer Scott's couple questions here. And, hopefully this was of value to you. I think marketing in this industry, marketing and sales has a forever tie, right? In any corporation or industry that you work in, they're usually working hand in hand with one another. I know my boss is actually the VP of sales. He drives what I do, right? So I have to understand the sales aspect to things, but ultimately what we do is about community service. And that's why I like what we do in the education realm, right? Is because that provides a level and a platform for service that's genuine and that is, accessible and really gives you guys an avenue to kind of bring this to your people. So thank you guys all for being here. I know we're wrapping up. Scott, let me take a quick read at the last couple things, and I'm going to leave up our contact information for everyone else. So for those of you here, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to read Scott's question out loud now and try to answer those. Disability, ask whether you had a calculator for disability buy-sell agreements. I don't, yeah, I think you have the right point here. It's hard to create a calculator like that because every company has their own formula, right? So we tend to stick to things that are, again, as I mentioned, universally applicable. As far as your second question on a report on key man disability insurance, I believe specific thing. I have to look for that one, Scott, and I want to leave this up here until my time. Actually, we're right at the time. So just again, thank you. I should have put that there. And let me look at that for you real quick, Scott, while we're kind of trimming. I can end that recording here. For those of you that are still here, Scott's question was about a key man disability. So what I usually go to is my business planning. I want key employee. Key employee disability insurance. There we go. Told you. Key employee DI, right? I did a big, I guess for anyone still here, I did a big webinar a while ago on business valuation and key employee valuation. And I learned a lot studying for that about what the value of an employee is. And that's very interesting concept. So this is a really good component of insurance and talking to business owners of, how do you determine what an employee's value is? What does it cost, to both recruit, train, and what is the loss of business for an employee? How do you calculate that? This is a high level report again, and it notes key employee disability insurance has become a specialty product and providers of this important coverage are becoming difficult to find, to Scott's point that there are only a couple companies that sell insurance like this. So look at that. We even got something in there. Mark, your question is about social media marketing and emails. Do I assist with that? Not within the scope of my job at this point. A lot of what we are doing today, at least, revolves around presentations that you create and the information sharing either through a Zoom or face-to-face. We really don't, because all of this material is done in a PDF format right now. A lot of this doesn't very easily translate, but I will say if you follow us on LinkedIn, I put a lot of great stuff out there. I create videos about, some of these topics in the form of, 90-second snippets talking about the importance of a report, what have you. Those are really great tidbits to use in your social posts. I would also suggest, just kind of going back through some of the other webinars that we have. If you do subscribe, we have a webinar area where you can see some of the other topics that have to do with marketing your business or kind of creating a brand identity. I've done a webinar on that as well. That might help, but I don't directly do that. I wear a lot of hats at our job here, and we're not currently staffed to help people create or use this material on social media, but we are actively working towards moving all of this to an HTML format that allows us to package it in that way a lot easier. So I know that's kind of a broad answer, Mark. I apologize, but it's something we're aware that people want to be able to, that's a good way to educate the masses, right? But right now it's kind of in the traditional format for presentation, which is, via this format like I'm doing or face-to-face. So but I'm happy to give you some, if you want 30 minutes on my calendar, I could give you that. I could always help. You could always pick my brain. I've been doing this. I've been at Advisys 8 years now. I've been working with financial planners and advisors for 5. I'm happy to give you some time on my calendar if you have questions, but otherwise that's kind of the extent of it. Anybody else have any other questions? That's still here. I'm surprised to see a few names here. I'm guessing most of these people are not at their desk, but if you are, thank you for hanging on. I appreciate all the time that you guys have given me. And like I said, hopefully this was of some value. I do put time and energy into doing this. It's fun for me. As you can tell, I have good energy about it because I actually don't mind doing this. So hopefully you find at least one little nugget in there in an hour, and you got some emails responded to in the meantime, maybe, and hopefully we'll see you next time. So just again, thank you guys all very much for being here, and hope you have a great rest of the day. Take care.